Okay, so my name's John. I'm a college pastor from Nacogdoches. I kind of already said this. I'm at Fredonia Hill Baptist Church. I've been on staff there for 10 or 11 years, doing a couple different things, majority of that being college. What's unique about that is I was a student at this church when I was in college, and so now I serve at my alma mater. I'm a product of the pipeline of developing. So are you an SFA alumni?
Our youngest daughter is.
Okay, cool.
SFA, so.
Well, hey, excellent. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you is, as I've thought about if I were to go back in time and I had an opportunity to redo my first year, what would my first year look like? What would I give myself to? What would not be worth my time? What actually has moved the needle that I should have given myself to earlier? And so the best way to kind of think about this is I'm a pretty logical kind of mind. And so I'm literally just going to walk you through, let's say you got hired last week and you were going to do a 12-month cycle from today. What would I say is worth your time? All right. We're going to assume you have some sort of small mass of college students. That could be 5. That could mean you inherited a group of 30. But we'll just start from the 5 and then kind of build along those ways. Some of these things are based upon my understandings of how it's played itself out in my own life. And you might disagree with that. Like, we're going to get to my opinion about small groups versus large groups. I'll justify my perspective. You might have a different perspective on that. You're more than welcome to have that. And I just want to kind of share, here's what I've seen, and here's the tricks and balances along the way. It's a lot of content. And so I can go more in depth on any of the things as I break down, like, here's what we do, or here's what I've learned, or here's the adjustments we've made. We can make this as practical as you want it. And so if you have a question, don't feel like you have to wait to the end of it. You know, most guys have a Q&A at the end. Feel free to let's just do this old school like we're in 3rd grade. Just raise your hand or whatever. And we can begin to just ask questions during the actual conversation today. But obviously, if we have time at the end, I want to walk you through a little bit of a Q&A if you have that. So does that make sense? Is that kind of like the goal for today? So I think everyone's got a copy of this, right? All right, perfect. So we're going to make an assumption, kind of like what I just said, first-year college director, maybe a resident, and you're thinking about college ministry. What would you do? And I kind of broke it down into 4 different phases. Here's what I would say. Like, you'd want to build it, launch it, feed it, and evaluate it, with the primary focus being on what are the actual nuts and bolts we need to do. So the very first thing that I would want to challenge you is, and how do we go about building the college ministry? Also, I don't want to block it, so if I end up blocking it, just yell at me. But I'm a sensitive soul, so don't yell too loud. So the number one misconception that I hear a lot from college pastors is a desire to create their own unique vision and strategy that's anti, or they wouldn't say it's anti, but it's different than the church's main vision and strategy. Let me just tell you that your lead pastor doesn't appreciate that. They actually will begin to think of that as a different way that you're creating a different culture, a different system of values, and a different group entirely that's moving different direction where the entire church is going. And so I think the number one mistake that new college directors make is they get in a room and they go, man, who are we? Who do we want to be? What makes us unique? What did my college ministry really suck at? And what do we need to change? And how can we do this better? The very first mistake that so many people make is they just take their church's vision and strategy and they go, well, they just don't get it. And they throw it away and they create this new one that prioritizes what they think the church should really be about. I'm using a little sarcasm, but this is something that I did in my own. I was like, yeah, we've got that, but it just doesn't emphasize evangelism enough. That was my thought. It doesn't emphasize this enough. And I was wrong. It was a complete lie from the enemy. And the very first thing you need to do is adopt your church's vision. And we're going to learn that you're going to need to do contextualized strategy. So if your church doesn't already have written out desired outcomes for every member in your church, a desired outcome that every single member, we want them to either achieve this, look like this, have this character trait. If they don't have that desired outcome, then I would be having a conversation with your lead pastor, your elder, whatever your church governance looks like, and say, I am looking to start this college ministry. I want to run in complete agreement and be in flow with the vision that you and the elders have agreed upon for the church. And to do that, I need to come up with a contextualized strategy. In order to get my contextualized strategy, I have to think, what are the desired outcomes that you want to see in every member in our church? So let's say that you have a desired outcome that he said, we want every member in our church to be able to disciple someone else. Okay, that just told you that you're going to build a contextualized strategy around developing leaders who make disciples, right? But likewise, they said, we want every member of our church to be focused on meeting the needs of other people. Okay, great. We're going to now build a college ministry focused around the desired outcomes of those things. That doesn't mean that we neglect evangelism, discipleship, community, fellowship, prayer, the breaking of bread, having fun together. But it does mean that we're going to prioritize the things that our senior leadership prioritizes. Number one mistake is that you come up with your priorities instead of submitting them to where the church leadership. So if you're starting a college ministry from scratch, what is the vision of your college ministry? I really don't care. It's the vision of your church. Take the vision of your church and then ask them what are the outcomes that you want to see, and then create a contextualized strategy. So your vision is like, this is where I want us to go. The outcomes are, this is the final destination. The strategy is, how do we get there, right? It's that space between Abilene and Amarillo. Like, what is that actually going to look like? So that's what I would say. Skip all of the things of like, what did most people do wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So the second thing I would do here is I would say, encourage you to do your research. I don't know if this is the next thing. Is this the next thing? All right, perfect. So this is in the build it portion. This is where you need to learn your context. And what I mean by this, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in a second, but like the college or young adult argument. Should we launch a college ministry? Should we launch a young adult ministry? So when you think about your context, there are different markers. I'll talk about Nacogdoches. There are different markers of Nacogdoches that are different than Fort Worth. They're completely different than Arlington. If I was doing ministry at UTA, I'm going to do it totally different than if I was at SFA. Versus you might look a little bit at a church like in Huntsville, or maybe in a church in College Station, and you go, man, this is just a college town, but with different sizes. The same playbook might work pretty similar here. And along the same line is understanding the context of who are your already bought in students. So I said, let's say you start with 5. Who's actually committed here? Where are we actually starting from? What is ground zero? Because you have to build from a base. Most often you're not starting from zero. A church wants to do a college ministry because there's some sort of critical mass that's beginning to form. There's 8, there's 10, there's 12, there's one Bible study that you want to get going. Who are your already bought in leaders? And what is your church already doing to reach those college students? What is the pathway that the church has already deemed as appropriate? And you're wanting to have conversations of evaluation there, not looking to just kill it as quick as you can so that you can restart, right? When you need to get a PhD in what is already occurring and what the church is already doing to reach these students before you come in and force your will. I said connect with 2 or 3 college ministries. And let me be pretty careful here. Your job is to lead students, not to become friends with college directors. So there's a fine line there. Because if we're completely siloed, we're living on our own and we have our own think tank, we have our own ideas, and we're just coming up with what we think is best. And there's a lot of fear that you should have about that, right? Because you have no checks and balances and you think you're the smartest guy in the room. And you're not, and I'm not, right? But at the same time, I've seen young leaders do this pretty often in the younger leaders. They spend a lot of their time networking with different collegiate leaders or young pastors or whatever, and just like being in love with what's going on. But they're not putting the boots to the ground to actually engage with the students. They're spending more time with the leaders. So we got to be careful there. The number one question that you're going to have to think about contextually, though, is whether or not you want to do a college ministry or a young adult ministry. Let me tell you how I see it. And feel free to ask questions. And it's like I said, you can absolutely disagree with this. So one of the things that you're going to have to, oh my goodness, guys, it's missing a page.
Yeah, go from 2 to 8.
Oh, no. All right, I'm just going to have to give it to you. So I guess just take notes and then, here's what we'll do. If you want the PDF of this, I can text it to you later if you'd like that. Just ask me and I have a Google Doc that I can send this to you on. In regards to whether or not a ministry should be college or young adult, I think you have to look at the city that you're in and what is the primary identifier of that context. Okay? Let me give you an example. In Nacogdoches, our primary identifier of college students, if someone is 18 to 23, right? They are a lumberjack. They are an SFA lumberjack. And some go to Angelina, but majority of them go to SFA. And so the primary marker is that they're in college or not in college. Versus if you're in the DFW, your primary marker isn't do you go to this school or this school or this school, but it's rather that you live in Dallas, you live in Fort Worth, you live in Arlington. Your primary identifier is not which college do you belong to. You can actually create a primary identifier if you use a young adult model by making the young adult group the place that they can find identity and belonging. Not identity, but a belonging in this space. Versus in the college context, in a smaller college town, they're finding that belonging already in the university. So as a result of that, the city lends itself, or a place with numerous colleges, lends itself to a more young adult approach because now you have numerous inputs across numerous college campuses. So now the types of outreach and evangelism you're going to do that based upon the age group, not based upon the geographic location. And college ministry is much more based upon the actual geographic location. And so when you're thinking about, do I want to do a college or I want to do a young adult, you need to be thinking about what is the primary identifier for people, young people, 18 to 25, 18 to 26 in my community. Is it that they belong to Tyler? Or is it that they all attend this one school? And so in that moment, you have a clear distinction. Like let's use SFA as an example. There's a clear distinction between someone who is a college student and who isn't a college student. There's a clear stop because that's the primary identifier. But if the primary identifier is the city and is belonging to the young adult group, then they can graduate and still belong because it's not like they were in classes with all these other guys anyways. They didn't know them from those spaces to begin with. So they don't feel like they've moved on per se. Does that make sense? And so I would actually challenge that if you're in a city context, really think about whether or not you want to move into young adults. But if you're in a more collegiate town context, focus on college. I got to pull up my notes from my phone. Oh, sorry, guys. Okay, the third thing I would do is instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, you're going to build your small group strategy. Now, when you think about launching a ministry, what often comes into your mind is a large worship night event launch where I'm going to stand up, I'm going to preach, right? I can't wait to have our own gathering. We're going to have, it's not going to be Youth 2.0, it's not going to be adult service, but we're going to have a college night where someone's going to play guitar, I'm going to stand up and preach. And I would just say that I think that's a really hard, really hard focus if your long-term goal is actually the development of leaders for the purpose of engaging the campus with the gospel. If that's your long-term goal, which is the development of leaders for the purpose of engaging the campus, then the large group gathering hinders yourself from that from the beginning. But if your primary focus is discipleship on those individuals and then the multiplication of those individuals, the large group gathering becomes very impactful after you've already mobilized student leaders to go and invest and do. Mobilized and trained. And so when you think about things, you need to be thinking, what is already happening as far as a small group strategy and what tweaks do I need to make? How do we need to maybe create, maybe maintain, and what does that need to look like? And so a lot of the practicals around this need to deal with like three different things. And if I were you, I'd be thinking about these three things. What is the content of these groups? Come on in, dude. What's the content of these groups need to look like? What's the structure of these groups need to look like? And what does the leadership of these groups need to look like? We're going to talk about this in a second, but your leadership from the beginning should have the DNA of being student-led and staff-supported. From the beginning, you want to push students into leadership. From the beginning, where you're the coach, coaching them on this journey. If you start off as the leader and then have them take it over from you, one of the things that you risk is that you create a culture from the beginning of come and attend. And you're wanting to instill in them that they are the ones that are going to go out on the campus and reach the campus. They're just better missionaries than us on the campus. Let's just be totally honest, right? And so how do we empower them to do that? So if you're going to be thinking about different small group stuff, one of the first things you do is like, what is our leadership? The structure and our content. Most likely, your group already has some sort of structure built in for a small group. What would it look like from the beginning for you to say, we're going to prioritize more than one generation in these groups? And what I mean by that is I'm not saying it needs to be a free-for-all, where you have the 40-year-old who just went through a divorce, the college student, the 55-year-old guy who just retired, and the single mom, right? You're not having all of them in one group. But rather, you're strategically placing older mentors in environments that college students can begin to rub shoulders with. If you do that from the beginning, you will be taking the load of shepherding off your shoulders and placing it upon the members of your congregation, where you're now overseeing that, but empowering them to do so. So now you might have the students leading, but you also have the adults being present and being available for mentorship. Now, we all know there are moments that you had an adult in the room and that adult made no difference in your life, right? They were just a part of the Bible study. But we also know, I've got guys that when my car breaks down, guess what I'm calling? Larry, what do I do? All right, there's already those built-in relationships. So some of them are hit or miss and some of them are really impactful. But if you heard anything from that, I would say build your small group presence before your large group presence. Always do this. So the next thing I would do, and I would do all this in the summer still, is that you need to become a registered student organization on your campus. If you don't know how to do that, it's one of the easiest and simplest things to do. There is a person on your campus whose job is to oversee student organizations. Figure out who that is. Email them and say, hey, I'd love to set up a meeting with you. I'd love to come in and talk about creating a student organization on campus, and that's in partnership with our church. I'd love to see if we can set up a time. For me, that's a girl named Miss Lacey Folsom, and I would sit down and have a conversation with Miss Lacey. Here's what I want to do. And now in our system, she's like, I love what you're about, but you have to have students to actually be the ones that are initiating the student organization, which kind of makes sense, right? Because it's a student organization. Well, that's great. Okay, cool. Now I know the information I need to do. And you're either in that moment mobilizing some of your core to go start it, or two, that your second option is that you're remembering that for when you feel like you've got some people who can carry on that. Often the person who starts the student organization does not actually have to be the functional leader of the student organization. You just need a student representative to start the organization. So when you start the student organization, what would that allow you to do? Well, in most college campuses, that's the pathway by which you can now table on campus. And if you're tabling on campus, you're now increasing your visual awareness of yourself on campus. These are just small little things that I would do to keep ourself ready so that when the fall comes and we're doing more of a hard launch, we're ready. So we're doing all this in the summer. And then what you're going to need to do, and this is really important, you're wanting to get the whatever mass you have. Whether that's 10 college students, maybe that's 15 college students. If you're able to gather them in the summer, great. If you have to wait for them to come back in the fall, that's okay as well. I would gather them together and recast vision and strategy. Now you might say, well, what's the strategy? Well, the strategy is kind of what we've already talked about. We're going to be small group oriented at first. And we're going to begin to hand that leadership over to students. I'm asking you to come be a partner with me in this endeavor. I want to do this. My commitment to you is that I am going to train you how to do it. One of the worst things that we can do is give the people the title of leader without the training of leader. So I'm going to train you to do it. I have them sign a contract for me, and all of my leadership things, we're going to walk through that process in a second. All of my leadership things, I wouldn't mind sharing with you guys at all, my content, whatever y'all want. But I'm having a conversation with them where you're saying, here's the vision, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to be about, here's the role I think you would play. I'd love to have you on the team. You're now creating a fire inside of them, helping them understand structure. You're not just saying, we'd like to go get college students. We're saying, here's our actionable step-by-step plan, and here's what your role is in this. If you don't have that, then you're going to just leave them hanging. And then you're having the same conversation with your adult leaders. Here's what I'm wanting you to be a part of. Here's what I'm calling you into. Are you willing to make a year-long commitment? This is not a month-long commitment. This is not a semester. I need a year. Can you agree that once a week I can have you in this space? Or whatever the agreement is that you've asked for them. And then you come to the moment where now you've built your system and you have to figure out what does it actually look like to launch it, which if you go to the handout, actually that part is still there. Page 2. So launch it in the fall. So how about I just hit pause? Are there any questions in regards to anything I've said as far as like the summer building phase that come to your mind that you are processing?
So you're kind of speaking to different audiences here, right? The college on-campus kind of person and then a local church person?
No, not at all. This is local church. So the local church has a responsibility to reach the campus, correct? The most effective way to reach a campus is for students to know that your church exists, right? That would be aware. The most effective way to increase the awareness of a church is for them to be able to be on campus at events, handing out things, giving away coffee, tabling at involvement fairs, tabling at wellness fairs, tabling at orientation, et cetera, et cetera. The only way you're able to do that is to become a registered student organization. And so I think college ministries have a responsibility to be two things: a local ministry in their church and a registered student organization at the same time. You should live in both of those spaces. Being a registered student organization isn't very hard. I mean, like 18-year-olds who live in their dorm do it all the time, right? Like this isn't crazy difficult. There's not a ton of red tape or anything you have to walk through. There's just a process you have to go out. Here's my officers. Here's their emails. Here's my faculty advisor. Here's the person that I want to say has repped us before. And you fill out that paperwork. They walk you through that process. And so now you have a green light to be on campus whenever you'd like to, as long as you're obviously following those procedures. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think I'm trying to tie it to my context.
Yeah,
where, you're trying to find whether a young adult or a college. And for me, I kind of found myself as both, Irving being in between two big cities.
Okay, good. So in that one, I'm still going to college campuses and becoming registered student organizations.
I think I was lucky because I did this with BSM.
Okay.
So they kind of did it for me. And I
Cool.
joined with my church there.
Yeah.
For the same thing.
Sometimes people let you table underneath their name. Like you can table underneath the name of BSM sometimes. But the problem with that is they don't necessarily bring awareness to your organization. You're bringing awareness to the BSM, which I love BSMs. I'm a big fan of BSMs. But if your goal is for them to be aware of the group that you're starting or you're beginning, you're going to want to table underneath your own name. So if I were in your context, I'd be thinking, what are the two colleges that I want to reach? Now, how do I go about that? Where are my students already attending? I have 6 here and 4 here. Perfect. Let's become registered organizations at those two places instead of going to 12 different campuses, right? Because there's a ton of, DFW is a ton of universities, right? Let's pick 2, maybe 1, young adult ministry where I'm going to reach everyone 18 or 24, but I'm intentionally a registered student organization on those college campuses so that I'm able to flyer and hand out whatever so that I'm able to engage with students, able to have gospel conversations on campus with those students. You need that because if not, they'll kick you off campus. That kind of is helpful. Okay, great. I'm going to keep going. So let's say it's August or September, right? So we've made it through the summer. If you kind of notice, the main thing you did during the summer was behind a laptop, creating a lot of strategy, creating a lot of like, here's what we're going to do, building the program. And if you're working on revitalizing your college ministry, this summer should be a lot of strategic planning, and where you're working and talking through minds on like, what are next steps? What do we need to do? Don't try to launch anything this summer. It's going to be really hard to launch things during the summer. So as you look into the fall, I'm beginning to think about, okay, how do I get people in seats? How do I get people to know about our gathering? How do I get people to know about our church? And you have a couple different ways to go about that. And like I said, there is a way that you can use a large gathering. Like if you did a large on-campus worship night for your college ministry, or you did a large young adult night at your church, there is a way you could do that, where you could get on campus and you could pass out iced coffee and flyers and then talk to people and just kind of create an actual like promotional strategy. I think I mentioned on there, like one of the things you can do is you could spend about $200 on an ad that you put on Instagram where you just kind of say, here's who we are, here's what we're about. You've now created a digital platform for people to know about you. But one of the things you have to be understanding is like, what is the one space that provides the easiest on-ramp to your small groups? What is the one space that you can guide them into small groups from there? So let's just say it's your church's Sunday morning service. Okay, then you're going to go and promote your Sunday morning service. You're going to push the Sunday morning service so that they can come in attendance. And while they're there in the room, you've now created, at our church, we call it Lumberjack Sunday, but you can have like a welcome home day, or you can have some sort of college emphasis day. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the first Sunday. If you need to push that back a couple weeks, you can. But what is the one environment that you can encourage people to come to so that you can have the sole purpose of on-ramping them into your small groups, right? This is the goal here. If you want to actually develop leaders, you need to get small groups going where now those students are leading those small groups. Now, it might just be one. It might just be two. The numbers here don't really matter. You're mobilizing your students to be a part of it. You've got some multi-gen inputs. You're ready. Okay, now let's get the registrants. Let's get people to register. How are we doing that? I always say, you need to get on the campus. Now, how you do this, everyone goes a little different. But one of the things that I would really encourage you is that during the first few weeks of school, you should turn your strategy brain off and you should be like a campus missionary. If you're jump starting this, you're on campus a ton, an absolute ton. And I think you might have to have a conversation with your senior pastor where you communicate, look, I need to be off campus for the next 2 weeks. I promise I'm working, but I need to be on campus. I want to pass out iced coffee every day from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I've got some students that are willing to help me out do this. I'm going to be passing out flyers, letting people know about our Sunday gathering. I'm going to be having gospel conversations with them. I'm going to be encouraging them and calling them to helping spread the vision of what we're about, raising awareness of what we're doing. I mean, just imagine if a new business came to town. If a new business came to town, the way that they would get customers is to let you know about the business, right? And so you need to get on campus to do that. And so figuring out how you can do that would be huge, which is why, especially if you have a young adult ministry, your social media campaign is worth your time. There's a church plant in Austin called New City that just launched maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And they spent a couple $100 just on social media and saw a 10-fold, 100-fold return on that versus printing out flyers and passing them around. Because that's where the people were. That's where the people are. Don't try to act trendy and hip and cool. Just tell them where it's at. And so you're going to be on campus and moving along with that. As you're moving on campus, the next thing, oh guys, I'm skipping my stuff. Register student organization, student-led staff support, we talked about that. Cast vision and firm leaders. Man, I really am. Okay, launch it. I'm behind. Hard launch in the fall. We did that. And campus presence, literally did that. Okay. If you're going to effectively develop leaders, you need to have some sort of leadership development program. And I think that is more important than a large group gathering early on. You need to have some sort of way that you're developing leaders. Now, what does that look like? I think one of the primary things that your students need to be able to do is, I would encourage you, your students need to be able to make disciples of others, but they also need to help their peer on-ramp into the ministry and have gospel conversations. So as you're thinking through this, one of the things you're wanting to figure out is, how do I mobilize my students to do the follow-up? A student came to the table, you're on campus, you got their information, maybe it's through a QR code, maybe it's through a giveaway, you've got their information. You don't want to do the follow-up with that person. You want a student to do that. They will be 1,000% more effective. And so how have you trained your students to do that? One of the method that we use something called Their Story, Your Story, God's Story, where I was seeing a sense among our students that they were hating the bit more formulaic approach to getting someone plugged in. They wanted to have a more relational aspect to it. And so we moved it with Their Story. How do you sit someone down? What's your story? Where are you from? Beginning to ask questions. And I always teach my people, we live in East Texas. All of us live in Texas, right? You're in Mississippi? Yeah. Okay, Mississippi counts for this. But this is Bible Belt, guys. It's not weird that if you went to youth group, in high school, we did a survey on our campus and found that 80% of the students in our campus have some sort of church background. That doesn't mean anything about them following Christ, but it's not weird to ask, hey, what was your major? Where'd you go to high school? Did you play ball? Were you in band? Did you go to church? Or just getting to know them. And that kind of begins to like help you understand a little bit of spiritual background. What's their story? Then you share your story. And you're like, man, I'm from this high school. I'm from going here. This is my major. This is what I'm working on. But it turns out, if you were to actually share your story, like Elijah, if you were to share your story and completely ignore the whole point of like, I became a follower of Christ and that changed everything about me. Did you actually share your story? Not at all. You just gave a little baseball cards back. And so you can do their story, your story, and it turns out it's impossible to share your story without sharing God's story. So you begin to do that. You have gospel conversations with them. Where are you at? And you're not just trying to get someone to attend your fun event of kickball, right? You're initially having that gospel conversation with them, but also creating very clear and tangible action steps for on-ramps. So let's say you're doing a follow-up with someone. Well, you're now asking them on the back end, man, what do you do on Tuesday evenings? We have a group that meets on Tuesday night, and we have a group that meets on Thursday night. Which one of those groups works best for your schedule? I help lead the group on Tuesday. I'd love for you to come, right? Matter of fact, all you've got to do is scan this QR code. I'll get you in the group meeting right now, right? And I can give you the information and when it meets. So we've got like this 90-10 split where 90% of it was relational. I got to hear where you're at spiritually. I got to talk with you about it. And then that 10% was, man, here's some clear on-ramps for you. And you didn't have to do that at all, but you trained your students to go and be able to do that. So if you're student-led and staff-supported, that is the student leading. The student should always lead the follow-up. Now, you might have to organize the mess out of a spreadsheet, all right? And you might have to delegate, but the student is going to lead it from there. So the students are training the follow-up. Now, in the first semester of the fall, you're often thinking, what is the spaces that your church is already investing in college students? Remember that question I asked? Well, I'm going to guess that for just people who are starting up, there's probably something like a small group already happening, or there's probably something like a Sunday school class that's already happening, something along those lines. So let's imagine that you inherited something where you had a Sunday school class of 10 people and with a pastor saying, you gotta get this college ministry off the ground. Well, what would be useful in your time? During that Sunday school hour, I would transition everything to be centered around the gospel and around the book of Acts. Just skip everything that you think this generation needs to hear in your first year, in your first semester. I'm not saying forever, okay? There's a time and place that we're going to talk about the hard hitters, right? But you are brand new. You've just started. What's the most important thing they need to hear? The gospel. That's not shocking. So I would think it'd be a waste of your time to spend a Sunday morning saying, let me talk to you about how a Christian should interact with AI. I think it's a good subject. I think we should talk about it. I think it'd be a misuse of time. But then in regards to your small groups, that's the space that you begin to work out some of the core foundational pieces of what does it look like to actually follow Christ. So like one of the things we did is we created like a 2 or 3 year map of every single topic that we think a college student needs to walk through by the time they graduate. Things like, man, how do I abide with Christ? What does confession need to look like? How do I read my scripture? How do I share my faith? But also, what are the characteristics of God? Who is God? Who am I? I'm having those kind of conversations in the small group environment and coaching my students on how to do that. So focus on biblical literacy. You guys are going to find this out if you don't already know it. Your students don't have a clue how to read their Bible. They have zero idea. They have zero idea. And you should not be upset about that. But as a leader, you should teach them how to read their Bible. Like we have a Sunday school class still at our church. My one goal is I'm going to teach you how to read your Bible when you show up. That's my one goal. Like you're going to get community, sure. Yeah, coffee is great. I'm going to teach you how to read your Bible. And I would just say like, you need to, in those spaces that you're teaching, your goal needs to be biblical literacy in the early stages. When you're with your leaders, you're doing a lot of like skills and training. But when you're with them, like your actual student population, its primary focus is biblical literacy. Train leaders. That's what I said. This is your primary focus. This is the number one thing you need to do, hands down. The absolute number one thing that you need to do is train your leaders. So I don't think that you need to go and create the wheel. I don't think you have to say, okay, I need to write all this new curriculum. I gotta train these leaders to do all these random things. No, you need to train them on very basic things. Do they know how to share the gospel? Do they know how to teach someone to read the Bible? Do they know how to do a follow-up? We already talked about that. Do they know how to table? You're going to do a lot of tabling. Your people need to know how to table. We have a little acronym we use to help with tabling that we use. But do they know how, when they come on a Sunday morning, what is their job? Like, just start with those basic ideas. Come up with a rhythm of how often you're going to meet with your leaders. Prioritize this meeting as your primary place of investment. So you have a primary place of teaching, most likely, like a Sunday school class or some sort of small group. But your primary place of investment needs to be in the leaders, so that you're continually investing in them. And then when you work through that, you also need to come up with some sort of regular routine time of prayer. If you can create from the beginning less of a come attend and move this table kind of servanthood, but we want you to come and be a part of discipling people. Now, how do we actually care for people? Well, we need to learn to have the conversations, basic conversations. How do I pray? How do I teach someone to pray? How do I teach someone to read the Bible? How do I teach someone to abide? How do I walk someone through confession? Like those basic type of things, right? But you also need to call them to, and I would say, a routine and regular time of prayer for their people. I mean, imagine you build a college ministry that's now focused on a couple things. Developing students so that they can be the primary disciple makers of the college campus. And now those students know how to be prayer warriors for their campus from the beginning. And that's all they know. So what is a regular routine? So for us, we do a prayer meeting every single Wednesday morning. They gather in my living room. We call it pregame, but that's just a fun little name I gave it. But we gather in the living room. What is the story of what did God do this week? Who are we praying for on our campus? Okay, great. Let's pray. And that's the sole purpose. And it's a space to just pray. So if you're focusing on anything, I would say focus on training leaders. So now let's go to the spring. But before I go to the spring, is there any questions in regards to some of the concepts I brought up? I feel like I'm moving 1 billion miles an hour. Is there any questions in regard to some of the concepts we brought up so far? So sometimes you're going to inherit things where you're starting from scratch, and other times you're inheriting things that already have thriving systems. If you're one of the ones who's maybe a resident in a place like Brazos, right? You're working in Brazos. Chris is a brilliant mind. He's already got all these things set up and running. The question that you need to begin to think about is why have we prioritized these things? If you understand the why you've prioritized certain things, then when it's your turn to replicate those things, you aren't just replicating because this is what we're doing, but you're able to contextualize the same priorities in a different context. And so when let's say you move from that residency and you go off to a different college or university, you're now able to think, okay, what did we care about? What was important to us? What mattered? What moved the needle? Now, what can that look like here? Because all of us would agree you need to disciple leaders. You need to train the leaders. Okay, great. What does that look like? Well, it's a little bit contextual, but it's also a lot of bit of, do they know how to share the gospel? Do they know how to do a follow-up? Can they table? Can they pray with someone? Et cetera, et cetera. So this is January. Congratulations. You made it to 2027. All right? January 2027. Here's what you need to know about January. The spring is a time that you will experience two things. You will experience a decrease in attendance. That's how it works. You're going to peak in October and September, and you will hit the valley in April. You will go down in April, so don't be concerned if all of a sudden your numbers drop. But you will also begin to see that a student who's taken someone under their wing and prayed for them and faithfully shared the gospel with them since October, all of a sudden when you begin to have conversations with them in April, they're now talking about this person asking questions about faith. They're now hearing this person gave their life to the Lord. This person's made a decision to return from their sin and follow Christ. This person has rededicated their life to the Lord. Well, this is just it's not like I'm quoting scripture here, but I just have seen this time and time again, a formula that around March and April, you see people finally, that faithful, long obedience in the same direction has eventually led to some fruit in someone else's life. And so numbers drop, but you begin to see gospel conversation, gospel influence has increased. So in the spring, I have an expression, you feed the hungry. You don't try to invent a lot of new things in the spring. You probably feel pressure. You're like, okay, I got my first semester in my belt. What am I going to do now? I'm going to feed the hungry. That's the part you want to do. No matter if you have 100 show up or you have 12 show up, you're going to feed the hungry. And so investing deeply, and this is most likely going to be in your student leaders. So the question will often come up, do I need to take a spring break trip? Yes. Yes, you do. You need to mobilize your students for missions. They have a very clear and obvious week off. They are able to support Raise. Now, the next question you're going to have is, do I have bandwidth to plan a trip? And the answer might be no. And I'm going to guess that if it's your first year, you probably are in the no range. What I would encourage you to do is one or two things. One, join with a trip that your church is already taking and funnel college students to that trip and make it multi-generational. Like if your church has a trip that they're going to do to Peru and it was only going to be 4 adults, I'd sit down with the lead pastor and say, man, what do you think about making this a 10-person trip and we can get 6 college students to go on it? Right? You're having these kind of conversations in the fall. But then the really easiest one is to partner with the ministries that are already doing it, already doing spring break trips that you don't have to plan or organize. You just have to connect your student to. I would do that early on. So like a great example of this is Beach Reach. Yeah, perfect. South Padre Island, which I guess you did in 2024.
And there's the other 3 of them.
Okay, so you've done that a lot. All right, so perfect example because so like our BSM goes to Beach Reach every single year. Beach Reach, if you don't know about it, you go and give rides to college students who are out partying at South Padre Island, and you share the gospel maybe 300 times over a course of a week. And sometimes they're drunk, sometimes they're not, but you share the gospel a whole lot and people get saved. So that is an incredible trip that you don't actually have to manufacture the details for. Let's say the BSM's going or another organization's going. You just join in with that the first year. I think you feel a lot of pressure to create. Our ministry has to have blank. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Like, just join in with what's already going, and move from there. And which is why I say partner instead of reinventing. I could probably talk forever about that. What you do need to institute, and this is what I would suggest doing this in the spring. I doubt you have capacity to do it in the fall. Is that you should institute a care ministry within your ministry. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Jesus leaves the 99 to go care for the one, right? Like that's rooted in the character of Jesus. So our college student leaders need to be taught how to go after the one. And in the spring, you get a lot of people who run. You get a lot of people who are tired, who are over it and moving on. So what we've instituted, and I think is a really simple way for you guys to do it as well. Just think of it as like a basic. Let's say you have a small group of 10 people and you have 2 leaders. Okay, well that means that each one of those leaders is responsible for 5 people. What's going on in their life? Where are they at with the Lord? At some point during the semester, I've sat down and had a conversation with them that was impactful and meaningful about where they're at with the Lord, what's going on with their family, where are they at with grades. And so when you begin to see them drop off, as a college pastor, you would go to your leaders and say, let's say there's a girl named Meredith. You might ask your leaders, hey, does anyone know what's going on with Meredith? And let's say it's your person. You say, actually, I know exactly what happened. Her grandpa passed away 2 weeks ago. She's been really struggling. I meant to tell you and I forgot, right? One of those things. Well, guess what? Now you know how to care for her on the individual level because you've outsourced that care. But you also get to hear, I haven't told, you might have your student leader who says, I forgot to tell you, but I've been texting her every day. I've been sending her scripture. I've been praying with her. What have you done? You've actually now given her even more spiritual leadership. So if you're student-led and staff-supported, that also includes the care of it. Now, there are moments that you have to come in with deeper care, right? We all know that, right? But if you're giving off that, I would really say you could probably launch that real easily in the spring. You could launch it in the fall. I think there's definitely a way that you could do that. But if you were able to launch it in the spring, you were be able to care for those who are going to drift. And if you really felt like you wanted to engage in a large group strategy, in the spring is when I would do 2 different test runs. I'd do a test run in February and I would do a test run in April. I'd be thinking about what would be my goal of my large event. If your Sunday morning service is a natural gathering hub for college students, then there is a smaller need for a large group gathering. Let me see if I can make sense of this. So like if college students are just naturally flocking to your Sunday morning already, you do not have as big of a need to have a large group gathering because they're already coming to a large group gathering, right? With probably a better band, right? Like, let's just call it what it is. However, if you are noticing, man, I got all these students in these small groups and I cannot get them there on a Sunday morning. All right, maybe you have an opportunity to utilize the large group gathering for two reasons. One, to have a deeper level of discipleship and care and create opportunities for evangelism, the come and see environment. But two, how do you begin to get them in the church building already for the purpose of moving them to helping them view themselves as members of local church on a Sunday morning, right? So the thing that I would be asking you in your head is, on a Sunday morning when you look around, do you see a lot of college students? Or do you see most of your college students are struggling in the Sunday morning environment and are more present in your groups? If they're there on Sundays, guys, you don't have to feel the pressure to have this large group gathering. Okay? Train up leaders, invest in the small group, begin to do things on campus. And if you want to do a large group gathering so that it can become a time when everyone's together, or if it can become a main hub, great. Once a month, do a gathering. Test them in February and April. Work with your team. You most likely don't have a band, right? Work with your worship pastor. What would it look like for us to pull us together? Utilize the systems of the staff structure together instead of you trying to invent the wheel. You're early on. You have no resources. Test a large group strategy. There's a ton of details we could walk in through that. I'll just leave that one there. And I'll leave you with this thought. Well, I think I have two more thoughts. I'll leave you with this thought. You should be doing applications and interviews for your leadership process, because that gives them a level of commitment, that gives them a level of accountability, and it gives them a level of expectation. I know what I'm signing up for. I know what my role is and what I need to do, and I'm aware of this commitment already going into it. So every single one of our student leaders fills out this Google form. It takes them about 20, 30 minutes where they had to write all kinds of questions. They answer all kinds of questions. Like, they give us their testimony. They give us, what are things you're passionate about? What role would you play in a small group? What would you say are your strengths are? Where else have you experienced leadership in your life? Do you agree to this policy? Do you agree to this? Do you agree to this? This is the commitment level. Is this something you're willing to make? And you're walking them through that. And so in the months of April, like April 1st, you're probably going to be sending out these applications. Hey, I'd love for you to come apply for this. Now, what's a good filter for getting student leaders? We always use these three things. You want someone who's already actively involved in your ministry. That might sound like a no-brainer, but you'll be surprised by the amount of people that desire leadership, and you'll go, man, they'd be a good fit. But then I ask you, do they show up to your small groups? And you go, no. And I go, well, if the goal is to lead your small groups, that'd be a really bad idea. So actually involved already, they're pursuing maturity in their faith, and they're bought into the life of your church. What I didn't say is dynamic speakers. I didn't say extroverts. I didn't say personality types. You can build all that. You can train all of that. You can teach all of this. But you need to have someone bought in already. Bought in and following the Lord. So you find the people that are bought in, which is what I kind of started off with. Who's already bought in? So let's say you had 2 and they had a group of 10. Well, maybe you get 6 at the end of the first year. All right, cool. We're going to run 3 groups next year. All right. You're not trying to motivate someone to be bought in. You're only taking the ones that already are bought in because you're feeding the hungry. And then you're going to do an interview with them. On those interviews, I always re-communicate vision. You re-communicate strategy. You re-communicate why it's important. You have to recast vision to your college leaders every 30 days for them to remember it. So their brains will forget what they're about. So every 30 days, there has to be some sort of reminder of the vision that you're trying to communicate to them. So as you think about developing leaders, you need to think, how am I regularly reminding them of the mission? And what's the mission? Well, the mission is a vision of your church, the outcomes that your senior pastor has said, we would love to see this happen. And the how is the strategy, right? It's your small group strategy, it's your discipleship pathway. It's how you're mobilizing your students to be about those things. And then lastly, I would say evaluate it. And this is the part that actually somehow made the handout. So there is the last page on the handout is a evaluation questions one. Y'all kind of see what I'm talking about? I feel like I'm doing syllabus day right here. But these are questions that I would sit down and I would work through after that first year. Now, the reality is, many of you aren't in this hypothetical scenario. Many of y'all just finished a year, or you're going in to your third year, or you're processing, this is my first year as a resident, but I've been a part of a college ministry for the last year or two, right? I would still take these questions and write them down. You're training your brain to think strategically about the ministry, okay? And you're beginning to ask questions, like simple things like, man, what should we keep the same? If you were to keep 90% of your ministry, you were to tweak 10%, if you were to completely rethink 10%, what would that be? Bring your student leaders in. I mean, did we live out our core values? The things that we said were important, do we actually live those out to be important? Do our students know our vision and strategy? If I pulled a student aside and said, man, why do we do what we do? Would they give me the same answer every time? Like, does our leadership training actually help students make disciples, right? And there's just a couple different questions you begin to just have reflection with. And then a wonderful quote by Eugene Peterson, which essentially just says, like, we need to care for souls even in our midst of strategy. That, yes, we are a part of strategy, but we have the obligation to care for the souls that God's given us. So I blew through probably like a billion different concepts, right? But what I'm trying to place in your mind is, like, what should you value? And if you are taking away like 3 things from this, I would say, man, you need to run with a vision and strategy that fits your churches already. Don't try to create another one. You need to train up college leaders who can make disciples, who can actually help fulfill that vision and strategy. This needs to be student-led from the beginning. And then the final thing that you need to be thinking about is, how do we actually engage a campus? And the number one thing is that you have to increase awareness of that you're even there. Leverage the relationships that are already there. And so your time and your energy needs to be going after training leaders. In your first year, there's so many things that you might think are worth your time. Train the leaders. Identify and train the leaders. That actually moves the needle. So that when growth comes in your ministry, let's say you have a ministry of 20 and you've got 5 leaders, all right? And which was great. You did a whole school year of ministry, 20 with 5 leaders. You've now added 10 more leaders. Let's say it was a really good group. You got 15 leaders. Well, when growth comes in the fall and it's middle of October and you're now looking at 50 students that are part of your ministry, you aren't looking around saying, man, we only have 2 leaders. We're not built for this. We weren't prepared for this growth. But if you think of leadership like the base, right? When you begin to build on it, y'all ever play with Legos? Like when you begin to build on it, if your base is wide enough, you're prepared for whatever might come. Versus, oh no, someone's not here. Here, can you please lead a small group? You haven't trained them, you haven't equipped them, you haven't invested in them. You do all that ahead of time. That's what is worth your first year. So I want to move into a little bit of Q&A, evaluation questions. I already did that. And I also put my number and my email. Anything, like any resources that you think would be helpful, whether it's content in our small groups, whether it's a leadership application, whether it's, literally anything to do with college ministry. If we have it, I'd love to share it with you. I'm not saying it's perfect, but if we're getting started, I'd love to help you not feel the burden to have to write curriculum every single week for your small group, or have the burden to help. I have to now write new leadership training material, and just use mine. Let's use it. Let's roll with it. Okay, so just in general, I want to open up for a time of Q&A. Any questions, anything y'all want to talk a little bit more about, kind of go in more depth, or maybe I can contextualize to your situation, or I could think through a problem that you're facing, anything that goes along those categories.
So I'm finishing up a year, but I inherited, I'm coming in, the ministry's already...
Yeah.
So I inherited a lot of leaders who,
Okay.
one of the things that in one of our previous collaborative sessions was just talking about leader commitments, and I know you mentioned a whole year.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, there's just some who kind of let the ball drop, or just,
Sure.
I don't know if I'd invite them to come be leaders next year, like have a crucial conversation.
Are you talking about adults or students?
Both.
Okay.
And then I also have some who, are part of our church who want to be leaders, already had really good conversations, but they're kind of in a waiting period where I don't have students for them. It's summertime, So
Right.
maybe if you could speak to both of them.
Yeah. So I've had those.
Okay.
I've had those. Every single year I have some student who looked the part. He was passionate. He said yes. She said yes. But then all of a sudden it's February and it's like, I have not seen you in a very long time, right? You're never going to outgrow that. College students are some of the most passionate people on planet Earth, but they struggle with consistency, right? Because they're still spur of the moment. They're still figuring things out. And so because of that, they'll say yes to something without counting the cost. And then all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, how could I ever do that? I have this part-time job, whatever. So in those situations, and this is built into the contract, there is an element on character. So I'm able to have conversations with them about potential sin issues, but then also I'm having conversations with them about their buy-in and commitment. Like, this is what we agreed to do. Would you agree to do that? And they know from the beginning, from the interview, I'm doing every single interview. I'm communicating to them, hey, if I begin to see you drop off in this, if I begin to see that you made this commitment, but you're not willing to uphold it, I want you to expect that I'm going to have a conversation with you. I tell them that up front. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to sit you down and man, what's going on? And I want you to know it's going to be a time of care. It's not going to be a time of admonish. It's going to be what's going on in your life. You're distant, and that's probably because there's something happening in your life. And that's when you talk to them, and they go, man, why are you distant? Like, well, to be honest, you said something that offended me. Or, man, my mother just got diagnosed with brain cancer. And so I just can't bring myself to come to church. Man, I had no idea. Let me offer care. Or, okay, let's walk through what I said. Or, my schedule just got busy. All right, well, let's talk about this commitment. Is this still something we're doing? They're 19. They're 20. Like, they need to be coached in this. So much of what I do as a pastor is just a coach. And so as I'm walking them through those things, I'm holding them to the commitment. But at the same time, also knowing in the back of my head, man, I'm a pastor first, a leadership coach like fifth, right? But one of the things that I am going to do is, like, if you're not maintaining your part, and I have this built into the contract, we will remove you from the position. And absolutely. And they know that, and they know that going into it. And so I've removed people in the middle of the semester. Now, if it was like April, I would just let them not renew another year. Sometimes it's easier for that. If you have an adult leader, like right now, if we're in May, if you got a couple adult leaders, man, thank you so much for your commitment. I've really appreciated it. And if you've communicated up front that it's a 1 year at a time commitment, you don't necessarily have to communicate, we actually would really love you to not come back. Like, you're just able to communicate a lot of gratitude for that year and then just fill the position with someone else going into the next year. So I think you just have to have a lot of accountability conversations. I've had that with them all the time. Is this still a commitment you're willing to make? I need to know yes or no moving into that. So, yeah.
Maybe you can help me think through a vicious cycle about being a registered student organization at West Texas A&M. It's a little bit onerous, and I'm running maybe 12
Okay.
right now, and I have to have 10 plus a slate of officers to even get started.
Okay.
I just don't have enough bodies to get the RSO, but I need the RSO to get more bodies.
Okay.
What are some ideas
Yeah.
that could help?
Well, so in that kind of context, you need before I just jump to my first thought, you found this information out by talking to the individual in charge of student organizations, or is it just looking at the website?
Student worker in the student organization office.
Okay. And so how are they verifying the amount of people you have attending?
I don't think it has to do with the number of people attending. I think it has to do with the number of students that would sign on the form that says they want this organization.
And you need 10?
You need 10 plus the officer slate, which is president, vice president, secretary.
So 13.
So 13 total.
And how many people are you running right now?
12-ish.
All right. Perfect. Man, I think you got a couple different ways you can do that. You can mobilize your students to go around with a petition saying, we'd love to bring this to campus. What do you think? And you'll be amazed at the response we get from there. Two, you could do a giveaway at your church for a large kickoff night. Like we're giving away a TV or something. I don't know. We're giving away like free Celsius. And because we're trying to start this and we'd love for you to come be a part of it.
Okay.
And just, you could find some sort of way to gather them, communicate vision, and then get some buy-in from that aspect. So whether that's some sort of social, whether it's a kickball night at a local park, like you're just creating space to cast that vision and get them signing on. But I also honestly think mobilizing a couple bought-in students to kind of walk around and just talk to people as they are all around the cafeteria and spread the vision of it would more than enough work, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, I would do that. Now, obviously, you might have to wait until the fall to do that, but I don't think that would be too hard of an issue. Any other thoughts? Any other hiccups you guys are facing?
What's like the biggest mistake you think you've made?
Oh, man. No, can I turn the recorder off for that one? Let's see. Biggest mistake that I've made. I thought I was smarter than our senior leadership. I thought I was smarter. I thought I had better values. I thought I knew the right things to prioritize, and they didn't. I thought they just didn't get it, and they don't care. And so I actually do care, and I'm going to go be about it. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So I'll just leave that there.
For me, the community that I'm trying to find more, which is Hispanic or like more Mexicans,
Yeah.
Especially, there's like this issue that it comes with that most of them they are Catholics instead of being the Christians.
Sure.
Because of the culture in Mexico.
Yeah, for sure.
The culture is more of a Catholic culture, and is more easy to find. And it's just like when people come to the U.S. and they're over here, normally they think that like because they're not in their country. It's like, okay, I'm away from that, but I'm not gonna get away from the religion that I used to have over there. So like, how do you manage that change of religion, if you want to say it like that, with the college students of like that you try to reach, and especially international students, because like even big colleges or SFA, that in SFA or Angelina, I mean,
Yeah.
We have a lot of Hispanic in there that goes over there, and I know because I have a bunch of friends in there.
Yeah.
How do you manage that like change of religion,
Right.
or how do you present the gospel and
Let me say this. One, I just realized what time it is. So we're technically finished. So stick around. I'll answer your question. We can kind of go in depth, especially in some of the nuances there. If you have any other questions, I don't mind sitting around and talking with anybody. Let me pray for us, and you guys can go eat dinner if you want with your team, okay? You should be getting some collaborative text soon about some breakdown questions to work through. And God, thank you for this group. Lord, may you raise us up to be faithful stewards of the college students in our lives. God, help us to think through next steps. May we develop leaders who can go out and make disciples, those who are passionately in love with you. We ask this in your name. Amen.